When it was bedtime, we carried black woolen stockings upstairs to hang on the end of our beds. In the morning we found sweets, nuts, a tangerine and a sugar pig, as well as a bright new penny right in the toe. Maybe pencils, crayons, a pretty hanky or a puzzle. We were delighted with these little gifts. We were allowed to look in our stockings before coming down for breakfast. When I was a little girl, families could not afford large, expensive presents, but we all had a happy Christmas together. We always knew that Father Christmas came secretly on Christmas Eve when we were asleep. His reindeer made not a single sound, and even though we listened carefully, we heard nothing of his coming and going, not even the faint tinkle of a sleigh bell. That's because he's magic, our parents told us. But the mince pie and the glass of wine we left on the kitchen table had always disappeared by morning. My granny and family visitors arrived on Christmas morning in time for a delicious dinner. The table was nicely set with paper napkins and crackers beside each place. The house was warm and cosy with a lovely log fire blazing up the chimney. Later on in the evening we sat around the fire, and Granny told us about Christmas when she was a little girl living in the country. Every year she gave each of us a present, a box of King George V chocolates tied up with sparkly gold ribbon. We played games, Hunt the Thimble and Blindman's Buff, and sang carols. Then it was supper time, hot mince pies and cocoa, then up to bed. We had a whole year to wait until another Christmas. I remember one Christmas Eve, peeping through the curtains at the winter dusk, watching the snowflakes twirling and whirling like tiny golden fairies in the light from the street lamp outside our house. Soon the garden was covered in a thick white blanket, so soft, so still. In the morning we woke to a snowy scene. Chimney pots and gateposts all wore fluffy snowy hats. A white Christmas, we all said. Hooray, hooray! We always had a Christmas party at school, with sandwiches and cakes laid out on paper serviettes on our desks. The older children organised a concert. Once it was the story of the three little pigs and the big bad wolf. I expect you all know that one. We all laughed and clapped our hands when the wicked wolf fell down the chimney and the little pigs were safe. Miss Walker was my teacher. She was so kind and pretty, with lovely dark hair. When the party was over, she stood by the door and gave each child a little Christmas parcel with sweets and an orange. We all said, "Merry Christmas, Miss Walker," and scampered home. Sometimes we went to midnight service at church on Christmas Eve. The church was ablaze with candles, holly, mistletoe, branches of evergreen, and beautiful flowers. It gave the church a festive look. The congregation, muffled in warm winter coats, sang the carols joyfully. Bells rang out in the frosty midnight air to herald the arrival of Christmas. We all wished each other a happy Christmas before making our way home to a warm kitchen fire. Overhead the Christmas stars shone brightly in the midnight sky. The postman delivered mail even on Christmas Day. We hoped there would be some Christmas cards for us. We always gave him a silver threepenny bit and a glass of ginger wine. He was a cheerful postman and happily did his job even on Christmas Day. The cards were arranged on the mantelpiece or the dresser. Presents were always opened after breakfast. A Rupert Bear annual, a book of fairy stories, a new jumper, a box of chocolates, a big jigsaw puzzle, warm, cosy slippers were the favourites in our family. We had to save up our pocket money to buy presents. We went to the penny bazaar to do this. a big shop in the high street. It seemed like Aladdin's cave, so many treasures at only 1 penny each. My big sisters had decorated the tree on Christmas Eve. It was an artificial tree which stood in a big red pot filled with sand. It glittered with tinsel, glass baubles, and tiny candles. A fairy doll with bright blue eyes sat on the topmost branch. We were only allowed to light the candles if a grown-up was there. To me it seemed like a magic tree, and I wondered and wondered if when we had gone to bed the fairy doll fluttered down from the tree and waited to say hello to Father Christmas. 1945 was the first Christmas after the Second World War had ended. There was great joy and thankfulness that the fighting was over and that Christmas Eve would not bring another air raid. Many soldiers, sailors and airmen were still far from home, and we remembered with sadness those who would never return. Food was still rationed, including sweets. We still had to make do and mend, but we could see Christmas tree lights shining from windows, street lights shone brightly, and the shops were cheerfully so different from the gloom of years of blackout. The time had come to rebuild our lives and the towns and cities which had been badly bombed, and to look forward with hope to the future. Bristol was one such city. Ships, homes, shops, factories and streets had been reduced to piles of rubble. Today you live in this proud and beautiful city that has been rebuilt to hide the scars of war. When I was 5, I had a wonderful Christmas surprise. It was a doll, the most beautiful doll I had ever seen, with fair curly hair and brown eyes that opened and closed. She was dressed all in pink with white socks and little white shoes, and I called her Sylvia. She sat beside me on the sofa after dinner, and we both fell asleep. Sylvia was my very special doll for a long, long time. I'm an old lady now, 90 years old, but I still remember all those happy Christmases. I do hope that when you are grown up, you too will remember your happy times.